A lot of art discourse lately has been centered around what tools make or break an artist. Is digital art real art? Or can artists even ethically use AI to enhance their artwork? The latter of which I already covered in a previous video. While these are topics that people are quite passionate about, I think that sometimes us artists are a bit neurotic. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we tend to get caught up into what others are doing with their artwork, often at the detriment of neglecting our own artwork. Of course, it is good to learn from other people's art process. Sometimes we do need to look inward if we want to improve our skills. I'm Ayasuna and I make videos, specifically art videos, and today I'm focusing on my own artwork. More specifically, my art process. Now, I am far from a master artist in any capacity. As I've said, I'm relatively new to digital art, and I just switched over to Clip Studio Paint a few weeks back, and I'm learning all the new features and gizmos that come with this program. However, I think I simplified my process enough that it applies to both digital and traditional art. It might seem a bit chaotic, but it is what works for me so far, and I might make an updated version of this down the line. So first things first, we have the initial sketch layer, and I like to keep things relatively loose. Right now, I'm not too focused on the actual accuracy of my pose, I just want to get the gesture down. When I was younger, a bad habit of mine is that I was too focused on details in the beginning. This was why a lot of my finished pieces came out a lot stiffer than I had initially wanted. Along with that, I'd also had to deal with lines that I drew on way too hard, which was making it hard to fix any mistakes that I made. Now obviously with digital art that's not really an issue, you can redo the sketch as many times as you want. In fact, prior to me recording this, I actually went through like 3 or 4 different sketches, because I wasn't quite sure what pose I wanted for the character. Something else about digital art, of course, is that you can turn down the opacity of your sketch layer. You can't really do that in traditional art. For traditional art, it makes sense to want to start out light and loose because you don't want to commit to too many details early on. Now this is mainly specific to me, but something else that actually helps in this process was to actually sketch in color. Obviously in digital art you can select your color, but you can actually sketch with colored pencils or colored ballpoint pens. I think it actually helps when defining certain features. And sometimes I also do like seeing the sketch underneath all the coloring. But that's just me. I know some people prefer a much cleaner sketch. I'm not one of those people though. So on to the next step in my art process. Once I get down the general gesture, it's time to move on to more details. Since I'm doing digital art here, I decided to just do the same thing, go over the sketch in another layer using a darker color. Here I start to define what I want my character to look like. Although again, I'm not really too interested in super fine details, I'm just getting down the basic shapes of my design. Again, this is similar to how I would work in a traditional art sense, so not too much changes here. Sometimes if I wanted to add more contrast to a sketch, I would pick a different color to do this step in. I'm pretty much cleaning up and refining my initial sketch. While I am focused more on detail, I still don't want to be too stiff at this point. I also feel in the cleanup step we can sort of lose the essence of our original sketch, if that makes sense. So that's something to keep in mind during this process. Of course, in digital art you can constantly make changes and redo layers, but in traditional art that's not really always the case. In that sense, a sketch can make or break an entire piece. Which is why it helps to do warm-ups before you get straight into drawing. It helps warm up your wrist and you won't feel as tense to get started. And when I say warm-ups, I mean like drawing a bunch of different lines as well as basic shapes. It is both good for warming up your hand, it also improves your hand-eye coordination, both of which is important in both traditional and digital art. What inspired this drawing today was seeing a bunch of different artists draw Miku, Hatsune, and a bunch of different traditional clothings from different nationalities and cultures. I'm sure everyone has seen the Brazilian Miku trend, and I want to give it a go, this time honoring my roots of Jamaican heritage. So I wanted this pose to be on the loose and flowy side of things. I honestly could have pushed this pose a bit further than I did, but I'm overall still pretty happy with this piece. It's funny, the whole Miku trend in general kind of reminds me of how the art community used to be when it came to trends. A bunch of different artists would just get together and draw something in their own style or culture or whatever sort of background. It's moments like that that actually make the online art community seem a lot more cool and a lot less, I guess, competitive or catty, I guess. Hopefully more trends like this catch on. I'm actually in the process of doing another Miku drawing, this time in traditional art. I might post that on YouTube Shorts or on TikTok. If you want to see that drawing, then don't hesitate to follow my socials, which should be listed down below in the description. And if you made it this far, you might as well drop a like and subscribe to my channel. I would greatly appreciate that. I want to do more art challenges and trends, so if you're interested in that, then please stay tuned for more. I have a bunch of different ideas coming up soon, and Inktober is right around the corner. I have something planned for that as well. I not only want to do spooky drawings, I also want to play horror games on stream, and I'll make an announcement about that soon. So once I decide to clean up my sketch more, it's time to move on to line art. Now I decided to cut out a bunch of it already since it's just me going over the same sketch. In this case, I didn't want my line art to be too detailed. I was going for a more cartoony vibe here. Now it's funny, I'm still quite new to Clip Studio Paint as I said, but I haven't really felt the need to touch the stabilizer yet when it comes to doing line art. That wasn't really the case when it came to me using Photoshop like I did before. It is sorta in this stage where my artwork can actually go in one of two directions depending on what mediums I'm using. In digital art, I will opt to do a complete line art. But in a lot of cases in my traditional artwork, my cleaned up sketch is my line art. Or I tend to do my line art after coloring my traditional artwork. For instance, I'm kind of an impatient artist, so if I'm using markers or watercolors, I tend to do my coloring first. Even if I'm using a waterproof pen, I don't exactly want to wait for it to dry before I get into coloring, so I just do my coloring first. I also tend to do that if I'm not sure a pen will bleed or not. I don't want to ruin my coloring, so I just wait for it to dry. If I don't want to do either, I just line with a colored pencil. With the right sharpener, you can actually get some crisp lines with colored pencils. I tend to use Crayola colored pencils because I like the harder lead. Now the version of Clip Studio Paint that I have came with a bunch of brushes. I'm mainly sticking to the default ones as of now. I might make a separate video of me testing out different brushes and seeing what I like and what I don't like, and just doodling. I might actually make that a live stream at some point. Speaking of live streams, I do my own live streams on twitch.tv/iasuna19, which I'll have linked also down below. Like I said, I don't exactly have a set schedule for live streams. I do them when I want, but mainly I will focus on art and video games over there, so if you're interested, then please go check that out. In the case I do have something planned that I want to stream, I will do a going live ping on YouTube, as well as TikTok and my other socials. So with the line art done, it's time to get into the actual coloring. Now for me, this is uncharted territories when it comes to digital art. I'm still trying to figure out what version of digital coloring works the best for me and my art style. For this particular video, I'm mainly going to do cell shading, although I do some blending down the road in this piece. My color mixing and color theory could definitely use some more work compared to traditional artwork, so I might make another video just for that, or like I said, I'll do a live stream where I study color theory. But I tend to be drawn towards in digital art or textured brushes, which is kind of ironic since in IRL traditional work I'm drawn to watercolors and paints. I don't know what it is, but digital watercolor brushes are just not my thing. I haven't found a brush that I was satisfied with using. I feel like it's a very difficult medium to replicate in a program as opposed to actually painting. That said, if you have any suggestions on digital watercolor brushes to try, then please let me know down in the comments. Not to be a shill or anything, but with Clip Studio Paint, you can use a lot of brushes from Photoshop itself, and there's plenty of free options in their media library. I myself haven't gone through all of them yet, but there are some that I am excited to try out, and I know there's some that I probably missed in me looking. For now, I'm using the default gouache brush. I like how the opacity is. It feels like I can cover everything in one layer, which is nice since I'm doing a cell shading style. Because of that, I'm starting out my colors with a base layer, although here I did add a little bit of blush and makeup because I did want to start out with some depth. I didn't want everything to be completely flat. When I'm done with the base layer, I make another new layer on top of that, and then I clip it to my base color layer, and then I add the shading. The way I'm doing it is quite slow. Like I said, I'm new to the program. I'm sure there's a faster way that I can do this without taking so much time, but I kinda do like going over my drawing bit by bit and seeing the progress come out that way. I guess since I'm using the gouache brush, I can actually talk about how I would have done this piece if I were using actual gouache. For starters, I likely wouldn't have done a line art layer. Other than cleaning up the sketch, I just don't see the point of using line art when I do gouache, since I'm likely going to cover it anyways. I would have likely also blocked out shapes, again not too heavy into details, since I'm just trying to get my colors down. People say that gouache can be a bit of a tricky medium to work with, but I actually think it's quite forgiving in some cases. While it takes some elbow grease, I definitely think that you can fix mistakes easier with gouache as opposed to watercolor. If I were using actual gouache, I would have also likely started this painting out with an underpainting. In my case, I usually go with pink or purple. It adds a nice warmness to my painting. In fact, I would have likely started with values first, then move on to the actual colors. I will say that with gouache it is easy to lose your original sketch, so that is something to be mindful if you want to experiment with that. Here, that's not really a concern. In this particular piece, I wanted to add extra blending to the hair and the skin. I didn't really worry as much about the clothing here. I'm still trying to find my bearings when it comes to digital coloring. It's still something that kind of confuses my brain, and I will be following more tutorials so I can get a more cleaner look. I feel like with traditional art, a lot of the process is simply trusting the process, but with digital art, things aren't just so clear-cut, I guess. Anything you don't like doesn't have to stay. You can change it or simply just delete the layer if you didn't like how you colored it. And learning how to deal with all of that is sort of confusing, at least to me. It's just something else that I have to learn about the medium since I know it can't replicate actual painting. Like I always say, it is a learning process, and if you're having fun, then there's not really any wrong way to do it. Something else that I do love about Clip Studio Paint is the whole blending brush. There's actually several preset versions on the Clip Studio Paint version that I have. The blending feels so much better than it does on Photoshop. Half the time on Photoshop, the blending tool didn't seem to want to work at all, no matter what brush I used. It actually does feel like you are blending real paint, even though it's just a program. See, Adobe, it's just the little things that make me want to use your program. I'm the type of artist, if I'm feeling a bit too inconvenienced about a certain tool, I just won't use it at all. But here, everything feels like it's within arm's reach. Not really too much else to say regarding the process here. Like I said, I start with the base colors, Then I clip on another layer on top to add the shading. Other than the dress itself, I didn't really go too bold from the color palette here. I want to experiment more with different colors, and again, that's something that I want to do for a future video or a live stream. Maybe I decide to pick a bunch of different color palettes and make a whole scene or character with them. Who knows, that's something I've been thinking about. One thing that I like about the whole Brazilian Miku trend here is seeing how everyone else decides to draw her hair. I was curious to see how her hair would look like if it were locks or braids, so I decided to do that here, especially since I wanted to go for a more Caribbean vibe here. It's so fun to see the different interpretations of the same character. In a lot of ways, Miku is the same thing as Spider-Man, and they can exist in pretty much any context. Within lore itself, it's actually quite possible for Miku to be from Brazil because there's a large Japanese population. I kinda want to draw a Texan Miku since that's where I currently am from. So stay tuned for that, I kinda want to take my time on that one. As far as my process for this particular piece, I pretty much said all that I wanted to say for this video, though if you have any questions, again, leave that down below in the comments. And yeah, if you want to see more speed paints and process videos, then please stay tuned for more. Drop a like as well as hit subscribe. And until then, goodbye.